Welcome everyone to this webinar. This is a wrap-up of May, if you like, when our focus was on active mind, active life. And what I want to talk about today in terms of wrapping the month up is the domino effect, if you like, of the impact of mental health on physical health. And we know common sense tells us that mental health does have an impact on physical health and vice versa, of course. Our physical health, if we look after ourselves, can have a very positive impact on our mental health as well. In particular, that we know that exercise and social support are two really good buffers against symptoms of depression. So what we want to make sure we're doing is exercising regularly and giving ourselves a really good buffer against those depressive symptoms. There's obviously other things that we need to do to make sure that we don't allow ourselves to fall into an depressive illness or depressive disorder in particular, because that can then be difficult for us to battle with. But the sooner that we get on top of symptoms that might be heading in us in that way, the better off we are. So look, mental health, I guess, from a perspective of our attitudes, our thinking, how we think about things, our behaviour, the actions that we take regarding situations that occur in our life, and our ability in particular to emotionally regulate are very, very important indicators of good levels of mental health. When we can run those three things, because they're all interactive. The way that we behave will affect the way we think will affect the way we behave, the way we think will affect our ability to emotionally regulate, and our emotional regulation abilities will affect the way that we think, and also our emotions will affect our behaviour and vice versa in that regard as well. So that triad of things that we're doing at any one time as a human being is very important that we are very mindful about and keep a handle on, especially if we're starting to experience either mental or physical symptoms that things aren't right. And from an impact that sometimes mental health systems can have on our physical being, it can be things like we start to get irritable, we start to feel stressed out, we might start to withdraw from social engagements, we might start to withdraw from our friends, we could become a little paranoid about, our friends talking about me without actually being paranoid, but we start to doubt ourselves, start to doubt others, and then also, our sleep can go off if we're worried about things and we've got a racing mind of a night. We're very concerned about some of the things that we might need to deal with the next day or during the next week, situations that are occurring in our life. Our sleep can go off, and then as soon as our sleep goes off, we often lose energy and we become very fatigued the next day. And that, once again, when we are quite physically fatigued, it's more difficult for us to think very flexibly, adaptably, rationally, positive and solution focused about those challenges that we all face in our life on a fairly ongoing basis. But when we're in good mental health and when we're in good physical health, and we're looking after ourselves in those regards, then it's much easier to deal with the situations. And we tend to also, when we're in good mental health and looking after ourselves from that perspective, we tend to see things more as a challenge than as a debilitating problem. Often when we view things as a problem and we're saying things to ourselves like, this is terrible, this is awful, this is shocking, this shouldn't be happening to me, how dare they do this to me, we start to feel down, we start to feel a sense of being out of control. We can express anger outwards towards other, or inwards, unfortunately, at times towards ourselves as well, where we fill ourselves up with guilt and self-blame about what is going on, and that often leads us to dark places. And that can have an impact not only in our personal life, but also in the workplace. It's very difficult for us to maintain good relationships, to be working productively, if we are really worried and concerned about issues that are going on in our life and believe that, they are very important, there's a lot of uncertainty involved in them, and that the duration of that uncertainty has or may run on for quite some period of time. That tends to wear away at our resilience, at our ability to find solutions, and our ability to cope with the problems and the challenges of everyday circumstances that will impinge upon us. And the way to think about that is if we let negative thinking, if we let negative behavior, if we have a pessimistic and a negative view and we're catastrophizing things in life, then it's like, I guess, blowing air into a balloon. If we blow little bits of air into a balloon and seal the end of the balloon off, for a start, there's no damage to the balloon because the balloon is made out of rubber, so it is resilient. It's built to stress. It is built to cope with that air that we're pumping into it. As the balloon gets bigger and bigger, of course, the rubber gets more and more stressed. And if we keep pumping bits of air into that balloon, eventually that balloon will burst if we don't let the air out. And then it's an analogous or metaphorical way of looking at ourselves as human beings. If we collect everyday stresses, they don't have to be major stresses from our workplace or our personal lives, but if we collect those stresses and we don't deal with them, we don't relieve the pressure within ourselves, the tensions that might be building up. And that can be both from a mental or a physical perspective. If we're not out there exercising, if we're not doing some nice deep breathing, if we're not doing some progressive muscular relaxation and getting the tension out of the parts of our body where it might build up in us, because everybody is different in terms of where the physical and physiological effects of stress and pressure build up, and we're not getting that up, then we too can become really quite stressed and really quite debilitated by the pressures that are building up within us. So I guess that also, really plays out in the elite sports people that we work with at Veretis, whether it's rugby, whether it's cricket, whether it's thoroughbred racing jockeys. If we're allowing ourselves to physically feel the effects of mental stress that is building up, then things like our timing go out, our ability to judge things will go out, and we're likely to have more accidents. We're likely to double guess ourselves. We're likely to make slower and often poorer decisions, especially when we're in the middle of a race, for example. If we're, a 50 kilogram jockey is riding a 500 kilogram horse, it's kind of like a weapon if it's out of control. And it can be a real danger to ourselves or a danger to others. So it is important in all aspects of our life, I guess what I'm getting at, to make sure that we do keep ourselves in good mental health and find solutions to challenges that occur as soon as possible. And if we need to get professional help from a psychologist to do that, help through an EAP program. If we've got it in our organisation, then we need to make sure we do that. And also, as I've spoken about to some degree already, the impacts on our social life, on our relationships, on our support systems will be tested if we are suffering from symptoms of depression and withdrawal from others. People often might not know how depressed or down or helpless we're feeling and may feel that we just don't want to spend time with them anymore. So it is important to reach out to others to tell them how we might be feeling, that, look, we're struggling with some issues in life at the moment. There's some pressures and some stresses in our life, and that if we are a little quieter than usual or we're not keeping contact to the degree that we were with them, it's nothing to do with them. It's just that we are trying to deal with these issues and work through these issues ourselves. And also, if we need to, just see if people are willing to have a chat to us, because sometimes just talking about issues and normalising them, when people say, oh yeah, that's painful, isn't it? Yeah, I know that can happen to people quite a bit in life. It just helps us realise at times that we're not alone in dealing with this. It's also a good reminder to make sure that we reach out to others and ask those "Are you okay?" questions if we feel that people are struggling, certainly in the workplace and in our personal life as well, though. And we can do that in a very caring and supportive manner. Make sure you don't wait until you get frustrated with someone to say, what the hell's wrong with you? You're normally quite up and about, and yet, everything's pessimistic, everything's negative, you're not returning phone calls to me. What's going on in your head? Don't wait until we get to that point. Make sure that we do it in an empathic and understanding manner, because it doesn't matter how old you are, what level of life experience you have, what sort of job role you have, whether you're a manager, a leader in your business, or whether you're the newest person into the workplace, mental health issues do not discriminate and will not discriminate. They can and will hit everybody. Everybody will have their Achilles heels regarding mental health issues and how they might pop out in us. And what might be a motivator to someone can be quite a stressor and debilitating to someone else who may not have had the experience of dealing with things or have quite as high a level of self-efficacy or self-regard as we might have. And so they get quite affected by something that is occurring. And that's another hint and another issue in terms of promoting mental health in the workplace. And mental health amongst our family members and our friends is catch them being good. It's what we call, and what Barbara Fredrickson in her research, her very important research, referred to as positivity. And that is basically, where possible, make sure that we become an energy injector for others, not an energy vampire. And one of the ways of doing that is to catch people being good 3 times for every kick in the butt or thing we point out that we don't or might not like that they're doing, or that we might like them to change in their behaviour. It's really quite important, and obviously you don't have to be a brain surgeon to understand that it's important for our children. So if we want to raise children who have high levels of self-efficacy, belief in themselves to deal with the situations and those important events and things that will happen in their life, then catch them being good. Build up their strengths. When they do something that you really appreciate, and they particularly, not just outcomes, but put effort into things, make sure we give them a pat on the back and say, hey, that was a great effort you put in. Didn't work out this time, but it was a great effort. What do you reckon we might learn from it? Are there ways that you might be able to go about it differently next time? And it's what we call teaching children in particular, but we can do it with our workmates, is teaching them to have a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset to events that happen in life. A fixed mindset says that if I'm really bright, I shouldn't make mistakes. And if I do make mistakes, then I'm not as bright as I think. I'm an imposter, and therefore there is something wrong with me, and I'm not as good or as smart as I thought, or other people were. So we can fall into this imposter syndrome, and where we might not believe that we're as good as other people are, or as good as we've been telling ourselves, and as capable as we've been telling ourselves that we are, or others are telling us that, hey, you're doing okay, you're fine, and you're beautiful. We start to doubt ourselves. And when that creeps in, then we stop persevering at things in life. When we have a growth mindset approach, and this is the work of Carol Dweck, D-W-E-C-K, she's written the book Mindset, and there are TED Talks you can watch on it. But when we have a growth mindset, then setbacks are not yet getting to where we need to get to. That's the way we view it, rather than I'm hopeless, I'm useless, this is terrible, this is the end of the world. We keep things in perspective, and we can still admit that they're painful. I wish this hadn't occurred. This would have been better if I had got it right, or that hadn't occurred, but it has. So what can I learn from it? And then we use what we call reflective practice to learn, and maybe we do some focused practice around different ways of thinking about things, or different ways of interacting with people, different ways of going about problem solving and decision making to get a better outcome for ourselves. And that is more around a growth mindset. And people with a growth mindset, when they see someone achieve something or do something really well, they don't get defensive about it. They don't try and make excuses as to why that person has been so successful. What they do is they sit back and say, wow, that was pretty good. What did they do? Is there something that I can learn from the way they went about themselves? Do I need to sit down with them and say, hey, that was pretty good what you did there. That was really very smart. It was quite brilliant, I thought. Can you talk me through how you made those decisions, or how you got to that point where you got that really positive and constructive outcome? Because, I don't think I could have done it. I think I would have spat the dummy, or I would have avoided the situation. I would have seen that there might have been conflict, so I would have stayed away from it. But you hit it head on, and you got a really good outcome. Do you mind sharing and just talking me through what you did? Because I reckon I can learn something from you here. Makes them feel good. They feel like they're in a helper role. And we might really just learn some really great skills rather than make excuses or feel bad about why we're not as good at what they did as they are themselves. So it is important at the end of the day to make sure that we look after our mental health and our physical health. But what we often do is we talk about how important mental health is, how important mental health is in stress, how important it is for the way we interact with our family, how important it is in the workplace so that we're productive and we don't get into what we call presenteeism, which is we're at work, but we're really not performing terribly well because we're so concerned and worried about the issues that we're not dealing with and not dealing with terribly well, and maybe building up some depressive or anxiety symptoms and maybe drinking too much and some substance abuse, trying to cope with what is happening. At the end of the day, we need to have an attitude that I'm important to look after. And if I'm going to be able to manage things in my world and manage them well for myself and others around me that I interact with regularly, then I need to have an attitude that I'm important to look after and that I need to manage myself in order to be able to manage those really important other things that I'm going to get involved in life. There's some good books written, The Mind Strength Method by Jodie Lowinger, a clinical psychologist out of Sydney in Australia here. Sarah Edelman, another clinical psychologist, has written Change Your Thinking. It's on its third publication, a cracking book, and there's a lot of good reads in that area. But if you do get stuck, make sure from a perspective of I'm important to look after, you do seek some help. And that could be through an employee assistance program at work, or head off to your doctor if you need to and get a mental health plan, because that way you get medical rebates. And there are PHN, PSS schemes around that you could ask your doctor about, where you can get, if you're really struggling financially, you can get some free assistance as well if you qualify for that through places like Headspace and other initiatives that are in place. So my encouragement to you is to look after yourself. I hope that the month of May in 2022 treated you well. If not, I hope there are things that you were able to learn. It is a journey. Good mental health is a journey. Stay on that journey. Look after yourself. Help look after others and their mental health. Keep a focus on helping people build their self-efficacy by catching them being good, not just catching them being bad. It really is quite important. And do the same thing with yourself. Make sure you keep your own gratitude journal. What have you been able to do and can do really well, not just what you can't do and haven't been able to do. So take care, everybody. Look after yourself and enjoy the month of June ahead. Stay warm. Bye for now.